Thank all of you for your service and for the men and women that you support each and every day. I want to follow up on Chairman Rogers' question, not only relating to China, the desire of China to have a blue navy. They're working unabated to, have a lot more submarines, a lot more surface aircraft, space architecture. The issue of red lines here. I mean, the Philippines are good allies. The Japanese have been allies of ours for generations. The Vietnamese are growing closer to us. It's interesting that our enemy at one point would be now our potentially a good friend. There seem to be a lot of red lines drawn here, and I'd like to get your reaction. Is there a red line here? As there is, has been pointed out, we have a red line in terms of what's happening in terms of Iran developing nuclear weapon capacity. We drew a red line relative to acting if Syria should perhaps move and use chemical weapons. Some of the rhetoric suggests, too, that the administration's drawn a red line relative to activities coming out of North Korea that are indeed threatening not only South Korea, but we're now setting up missile defense where before perhaps people felt we didn't need that type of missile defense. But tell us about these red lines here, because I think to some extent our credibility is on the line here. Would you talk about this issue of red lines here and how prepared are we to act? Because obviously people are looking to see whether we are capable of acting.
Thank you, Congressman. If I might, let me begin with your first point about picking up on Chairman Rogers' question on China and South China Sea, Pacific sea lanes. Then I'll respond to your other components, South Korea, Iran. First, international rights of the sea, nations. Every nation agrees that the freedom of navigation on the high seas is a pretty basic component of a nation state. How you protect that then becomes the issue. That's why our allies, our treaty obligations, our relationships are, I've always believed, and are going to be even more so, critically important to these kinds of issues, which are clearly not only in America's interest, but because we have a global economy that is indeed global. Freedom of the seas is indispensable for that global economy, for our interest, our allies' interest. When I noted in one of my responses about shifting assets and rebalancing what we're doing in the Pacific, I mentioned specifically the literal ship visits in Singapore, using that port more, putting Marines in northern Australia, moving Marines to Guam, so on. That's all part of the tactical components to fulfill the strategic interests of certainly our country and our allies' interests in the Pacific, in keeping those sea lanes open and keeping a very strong forward presence and projecting power in those areas. That's real. As to red lines in Iran regarding the North Koreans, I would say this, that the President of the United States has made very clear what his red lines are in each of these specific areas. Your question to me as Secretary of Defense, and the Chairman may want to add something to this, is are we prepared to back up whatever decision the President may have to make in fulfilling the President's commitment for our national security interests as well as our allies.
Your Israeli counterpart was reported in the Jerusalem Post in an interview, asked if the Israeli Defense Forces had the capabilities to attack alone in Iran. Benny Gantz said unequivocally, yes. Are we prepared to support their effort? Is that another red line, or is that we have a joint responsibility to come to the Israelis' aid if they take some sort of unilateral action?
Well, that's a policy issue that the President would have to decide. My role, the Department of Defense, is to be able to support whatever policy decisions the President makes. The relationship with Israel and our military relationship is as close as it's ever been, whether it's missile defense, Iron Dome, or rocket defense, the different weapon systems that we are assisting them with, our military-to-military relationships. I'm going to be in Israel in a few days. Our interests are very clear and common, and so I would answer your question that way, and I think the Israelis know that, and we know that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are a lot of red lines out here, and I'm just saying this is, when we issue these red lines, there's the judgment call is that if there's a problem, we're going to act, and obviously we have to do that, diplomacy first, but in reality we need to have the military capability to sustain some sort of operation if we start it.
We have the military capability, and we have the ability to provide the President what's required to protect the interests of this country and our allies.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Granger.
Thank you. I have two questions, and the first one is to General Dempsey, and we're talking about relationships.